All right, let's dive right into this explainer. The story we're unpacking today starts with an incredibly striking and, frankly, deeply relatable situation. The narrator watched his best friend literally destroy his own peace just by playing the good guy. You know the type, right? The friend who gives absolutely everything, stays late at work to cover for coworkers, pays for dinners when people conveniently forget their wallets, always the shoulder to cry on for folks who literally never ask how he's doing. And man, the emotional toll was devastating. He was just exhausted, drained, completely hollowed out, a shell of himself sacrificed for people who wouldn't even remember his name. But fast forward 3 years. The narrator sees him again, and he's not broken anymore. He had become ruthless. The exhaustion, gone, replaced by this sharp, impenetrable calm, and he said something absolutely unforgettable. The world didn't change, I did. I stopped being easy to break. And you know, that right there is the core of the psychological transformation we're exploring today.
So it really makes you wonder, right? Why did the good get broken first? It's a harsh reality, but the world doesn't destroy you because you're kind. It destroys you because you confuse being kind with being harmless. When you're constantly bending over backwards just to be understood, endlessly compromising your own needs to be respected and loved, well, the ungrateful twists that empathy into a weapon. Every single time you apologize for someone else's bad behavior, the more you give, the less they actually see your value.
Right now, there are probably 2 versions of you fighting for control. Version 1 is the one who apologizes, tolerates disrespect, and just keeps hoping toxic people will eventually change their ways. But then there's version 2, silent, certain. This is the version of you that just removes toxic elements from your life without a single ounce of noise and absolutely zero guilt. Today is all about the psychological blueprint for shedding version 1 and finally awakening version 2.
Now we have this famous quote from Niccolò Machiavelli. And look, it isn't actually about cruelty at all. It's really about control. It's about knowing exactly when to stop fracturing yourself just to keep other people whole. Ruthlessness, in this highly specific context we're talking about, is simply the act of correcting behavior by no longer rewarding betrayal with your presence. You're just drawing a line in the sand.
And making this shift? It requires building a brand new foundation with a super simple but profound affirmation. I will not break again. Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's an anchor. It's the very first step in shedding that old, over-accommodating self and kicking off a 5-stage psychological evolution.
So let's look at the first stage. Stage 1. Cut off the ungrateful.
There's this really fascinating reality in dark psychology about how we manage our personal energy. When you just freely give your energy, your forgiveness, and your time away, others subconsciously devalue your worth. It's crazy, but people instinctively equate constant, unquestioning generosity with inferiority. They assume you give so easily because you desperately need to be liked. Machiavelli understood this dynamic perfectly. Ungrateful people exploit your goodness precisely because they don't fear losing it. They know your mercy is predictable. Every single time you tolerate disrespect, you aren't taking the high road. You're actually training them to see you as disposable.
Now let's redefine a concept we hear about a lot: detachment. We so often think of detachment as being aloof or unfeeling, right? But begging for attention or closure only broadcasts weakness, and weakness invites exploitation. Detachment isn't coldness, it's ultimate control. It is the highly refined skill of walking away from anything, whether that's a job, a friendship, a relationship, that threatens your self-respect. In this framework, your absolute indifference is your ultimate revenge. To really lock in this first stage, you've got to adopt a totally non-negotiable mindset. My kindness has limits. You absolutely must conserve your energy like a weapon. Your care, your empathy, and your time, those are precious resources. And from now on, you only grant them to those who have actively earned them through consistent respect.
All right, let's move right into stage 2. Turn your pain into power.
You know, pain is actually the purest teacher we have, because it absolutely refuses to flatter your ego. It just burns away everything weak, everything naive inside you, until only the real hardened you remains. The only difference between irreparably broken people and fiercely powerful people is simply what they choose to do with that pain. Instead of drowning in it, instead of crying out and asking why me when you're betrayed, the strategic mind asks, what is this teaching me about control? Every betrayal shows you exactly who you trusted way too easily. Every painful rejection reveals exactly where you outsourced your self-worth.
Think of pain as a currency. Every single moment of deep suffering is a huge opportunity to evolve into someone utterly untouchable. When you transmute suffering into strategy, you stop chasing closure from the people who hurt you, and you start creating real power, You study your enemies instead of hating them. So what does that actually look like in real life? Well, it means when a coworker takes credit for your work or a friend betrays your trust, you don't throw an emotional fit. You observe their patterns. You note their manipulation tactics. You learn their playbook so well that they can never, ever run those plays on you again.
And that brings us to the core affirmation for this stage. My pain builds power. Why does this matter so much? Because when you walk around wearing your scars not with shame, but as forged psychological armor, you just can't be caught off guard anymore. You no longer fear pain because you've survived it, you've studied it, and you've weaponized it. You become incredibly unpredictable. And unpredictability, that is pure power.
That armor leads us directly into stage 3, the weapon of silence. Look, the hunger to be understood by everyone is a massive trap. When you're constantly explaining yourself, writing those long paragraphs in text, trying to justify your boundaries, hoping people will finally see your good intentions, you're actually handing manipulators the exact blueprint to your emotions. Over-explaining is a deeply defensive act. It proves to the other person that you are desperately seeking their validation. The most intimidating, commanding people are the ones who do not explain why they act or feel. They totally embody this Machiavellian principle. Their silence creates a heavy, undeniable psychological tension, and it's that tension that naturally commands respect.
The strategy of silence is just incredibly potent. First off, it makes you entirely unreadable. And if people can't read your emotional state, they simply cannot control you. Second, nature abhors a vacuum, right? So silence forces others to nervously project their own insecurities and hidden motives just to fill the quiet. Third, it completely shifts the balance of control without initiating a single, exhausting confrontation. And finally, it weaponizes your composure. The weak will always rush to loudly prove their point, but the strong will sit back, stay utterly silent, and wait for the absolute perfect moment.
Mastering this stage means living by this concept. My silence controls chaos. You just stop defending your every move. You allow others to misunderstand you if they want to. It doesn't matter. You realize that your absolute restraint speaks infinitely louder and hits significantly harder than the chaotic noise of an argument. All right, moving on to stage 4. Build your psychological armor. Living your life without boundaries is literally the ultimate form of self-betrayal. Every single time you forgive someone without enforcing a consequence just to keep the peace, you surrender a vital piece of yourself. A heart without armor is really nothing more than a target. Now, boundaries are not massive defensive walls built out of fear. Think of them as carefully constructed gates that protect what is sacred inside you. They are clarity, not cruelty. When you calmly say no, or you cut off access to someone who continually disrespects you, you remove their leverage entirely. The truly powerful don't waste time arguing about respect. They simply demonstrate it through distance. Loyalty is one of those concepts that gets dangerously twisted. Absolute blind devotion, that simply invites massive betrayal. Loyalty must always be a highly calculated, selective act. Just think about your daily life for a second. If you're keeping toxic people around simply because you're afraid of being lonely, you're operating as version 1, and you're going to be broken. Your loyalty should be treated as a rare privilege, not a lifetime guarantee.
The anchor for this stage is the firm realization, my boundaries protect me. Setting boundaries actively filters the genuinely loyal from the purely opportunistic. It's a powerful declaration of exactly where your peace begins. You're treating your mind, your time, and your energy like an impenetrable fortress. Which brings us to the final, really profound evolution, stage 5, how to become untouchable.
Now, this is not about building arrogance, okay? It's about achieving complete, uncompromising psychological sovereignty over yourself. The untouchable mindset requires shedding the very last remnants of your emotional dependence. You have to absolutely stop chasing external approval. You act from strategy, meaning your anger is carefully measured and your fear is completely irrelevant. You become complete within yourself, refusing to be just a mere reflection of other people's opinions. What this essentially does is turn you into a psychological enigma. To put it simply, you become a puzzle that toxic people eventually just give up trying to solve. You make it abundantly clear that crossing you has a permanent cost.
When you truly internalize this stage, a monumental shift happens. You realize, nothing can break me. The world is always going to test your patience. People will always try to betray your trust. The weak are going to break under that pressure, and the fearful will react impulsively. But you're no longer the version of yourself that bends to accommodate everyone else's flaws. You are the version that rules your own reality. And we are left with this final stark shift in identity. I am untouchable now. By ruthlessly cutting off the ungrateful, turning your deepest pain into strategic power, mastering the devastating weapon of silence, and building impenetrable boundaries, you actively strip the world of its leverage over you. So, it begs a fascinating and frankly urgent question for all of us. Are you still bleeding your energy to the unworthy, or are you finally ready to become the architect of your own unshakable peace?